it's like wakes up and
Yeah.
still like eating. I'm double checking, but no worries. But you're like like she still gets hungry, and I'm like, but like I will wake up and be like, oh, I slept the whole night. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. Like I didn't feed them. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, is everyone okay? Oh
Right.
my gosh. So I'm just checking to see if it's picking up on Instagram, and it says, I mean, I think it's all kind of going
Okay.
live, go live. I'm going to double check YouTube and just kind of see where we're at.
Sure.
And then we should get started, which I'm really pumped to hear your story, because I like know it, but I don't know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Okay, so it says it's live. We'll
All right.
see.
Sweet.
We'll see what happens. Hopefully, if anyone's watching us live, could you just give us a chat, a hello?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
is this working? Okay. I'm also going to record it just in case.
Yep.
None of this
Sweet.
works. Okay, so let's dive in. So Brittany, I met you through the HA Society.
Yep.
And you have a unique yet common yet then unique story of how you got HA, how you found out you have HA, and then the path to healing. So let's just dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Brittany, and I was diagnosed with HA officially in like April of 2017. And it was a series of, going to doctors, talking about how I didn't have a period, how, just get on birth control, which I did, and then got off of it, and then still no period. And I just didn't like the way birth control made me feel either. And I was just trying to figure out like what is wrong. And I was always a competitive athlete, like a lot of other HAers. I was a competitive swimmer and runner my whole life. I was on the triathlon team in college. So just always had lower body, lower BMI, and just had different issues. And in that regard, that I didn't really know were issues, because all the doctors said, oh, it's normal for an athlete like you. And I just wish that wasn't the common answer, because it's not normal if your body is clearly not, responding in the right ways hormonally. So after having gone to the doctor, they're talking about, well, you should really reduce your exercise, or you should really, do this or that. And they knew I was a dietitian, which I am, and it is more common than I thought among dietitians. I think just
Pause it there. It is it is very, 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 very common. And I don't know exactly, I mean, I don't have any thoughts behind it. I mean, like, I was a nutrition coach and greatly developed HA, right? Yeah. I think it's interesting because it's like we either develop it because we want to maintain this image of what healthy looks like, and then obviously that gets taken to the extreme, or we've had it and then therefore we dive into it. Into nutrition. But it's really not uncommon for this to be a really common theme. And so just keeping that in mind, there may be a lot of people that you're following on Instagram or Facebook who actually is giving advice, but from a place of actually having HA. You know what I mean? And so whenever I realized like I was that person, I was like, and it really called like this attention to like, I know it sounds strange, but accountability of like, hold on, let me get myself sorted out first and figure and like, what does health really mean before I even talk to another person about health? Because I've gotten myself in this situation, not knowingly. So it's not like I did it malicious. No one does it maliciously, especially when doctors are like, that's normal. You're fine. Like, you don't need to it. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't help. But I love that you brought that up, that it's really not uncommon. And therefore we really need to be mindful of the information that we're taking in.
Absolutely.
Not that I need to see someone's credential as, do you have a period? You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? Just be mindful that it's very prevalent in the fitness, health, wellness community. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Sorry to
It
interrupt. I
is.
was like, that's
No,
good.
no. And as a practitioner, like it makes me so much more aware of working with clients, like asking about stuff like that, asking about their period health, because, I do come from a place with guiding people through medically necessary weight loss. When a doctor, is recommending like, hey, for your health, for your knees or whatever, like, of course, there's a healthy way to lose weight and there's obviously a time and a place for it. But being able to guide people and also being able to guide people on, okay, you don't need to be this weight that the doctor may say you need to be at. And I think that's another reason that there's so many issues with diet culture and just even with the westernized medicine of just talking about like, well, what BMI is. So anyway, that's a whole nother tangent. But again, I know a lot of HAers will get obsessed with the BMI scale or, whatever the scale says, and just understanding that there is health at every size. And so that's changed my perspective as a practitioner, having gone through everything I have. So, that's a side note. But yeah, just being kind of obsessed with the scale over years, realizing like, okay, the scale doesn't define my worth, but at that time it did. And I think just the hardest part of recovery for me was surrendering and knowing that I, for many years, just like ignored the HA diagnosis. I just kept like, oh, I don't have a period, like it's not regular, whatever. Like, I just didn't talk about the diagnosis. Like even when I met my now husband, like I talked about, having gone to that doctor's appointment and stuff, but like I didn't talk about the diagnosis because to me it's just like, oh, well, I just don't have a regular period, whatever, and then getting to the point where we were engaged and we knew we wanted to get married, and I had, didn't want to be on birth control. I wanted to do natural family planning. I wanted to be aware of fertility, using fertility awareness-based methods. Exactly. And all the things. And it's like, how the heck do you do all that if you have no period? And that stressed me the frick out, and I knew that was like where God was calling us with like our family, but I was like, I had no idea how to do that. So then met with other functional medicine providers and actually having to talk to a doctor about, okay, this is what I've been diagnosed with in the past, and just having to be like super raw and real about all that. I think that was just really, really tough. And just like owning up the diagnosis and realizing like, okay, if I want to get better, like I actually have to do something about it. I can't just be doing the same thing. It's insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So that was the tough part.
So you said something really important so like you actually had gotten the diagnosis of HA, which is kind of rare. So kind of walk us through like, how did you find somebody that actually knew about HA?
Yeah, I think I had been seeing my regular OBGYN, and he was just kind of like, had me on birth control, then took me off, didn't have a regular period. And then he's like, I'm going to recommend you to a fertility specialist. And at that time, I was just out of college. I wasn't dating anybody. Like I had no reason to be focusing specifically on fertility. So I thought, but now we know how important that is. And that's really the whole background behind HA. So I did meet with this specific doctor who had a lot more training in that apparently. So it's not somebody I've seen since, but now I know she was somebody that started my whole journey, honestly.
So just kind of back up with me. How do you think that you specifically, like, what were your factors? I mean, obviously we know that it's due to like low energy availability or so reduced to the fact that your body was like, we're just not going to turn on the HBO axis. But how did that manifest for you? Like, you know what I mean? None of us wake up and we're like, and then I plan to chronically undereat and just not have a cycle. Like that's the direction I'm going in my life. So like, how did, like, now looking back, recovered, having a baby, you know what I mean? Postpartum, kind of in that life now, like we can look back and be like, oh,
that was the thing. Yeah.
Started here a little bit.
Yeah. So I think back when I was a junior in high school, I was a competitive swimmer and runner, like I mentioned, and that really got to me with having it be such like a body weight focused sport and just a body physique focused sports really. And realizing that there was a time that I underate during the season, I suffered tremendously with my times and everything. And then realized like, okay, you've been under eating, you know, because I knew I was like losing weight, I was losing muscle. But of course I was focused on that physique aspect, and so dangerous. The devil just like totally gets in there and it sucks. Now being on the other side of it, knowing that that was my issue. And then throughout college, I actually gained weight and I was happy. I was healthy. I had gained a lot more than I expected. But you know, freshman 15 weight, freshman 20, whatever. Then I ended up struggling with binge eating at night because I was so frustrated with how much weight I had gained, started restricting, and then that whole binge cycle. And then when I finally made peace with food and was like, okay, I can have balance and eat all the things, then I stressed myself out with working a lot. I had 3 jobs when I graduated college to pay off my student loans. I was constantly on the go. And I think stress, honestly, just with a mixture of not getting enough sleep, were my 2 biggest aspects of HA. So I don't think that I was ever truly like under eating purposely. I think more of it was just like being constantly on the go and being under stress, not getting enough sleep. And so when I was really honing in during our engagement period into being newly married, my husband's number one focus for me was keeping my stress down and really making sure I was getting enough sleep every night. And those 2 things were a really big part of just me being able to recover well. Because when I was not as stressed and when I was sleeping well, I was eating more and eating better. And so it's amazing how like I didn't realize how I was just working so much during the day, and like, oh, those snacks that I used to have, it wasn't happening because I was just so focused on working. And so realizing like, especially postpartum now, like focusing on the fact that I need to keep myself fueled. I need to keep myself going because I want to get that organic period back whenever it does come. And just knowing that I need to do the right things for that.
Yeah, I think we're constantly shocked at what impacts our food intake. And so we're like, no, I'm not restricting, but there's so many things like stress naturally dulls our hunger signals, right? And so you don't even have to be like, I'm having a bad body image day, I'm going to restrict, boom, HA, right? It could just be like so many lifestyles that lead to under eating that under eating is still the issue. And so while had you only focused on just under eating, you would not have recovered. But it's interesting that we had to do certain things to get it in line so that you could feel properly and eat enough, right? So it's still the main driver, but you know, getting to a place to address that main driver is a completely different situation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, my 13-year-old dog is losing it in the background. So I don't know if anyone can hear that, but that is what's going on. I'm like, come on. As soon as you hit the live, right?
I know. It's
like,
real life. It's
like
okay.
Everything be like malfunctioning, dogs be losing it, all of that. Okay, so you were like, okay, I'm going to sleep, eat, and got my period, you know, like I'm focused on that. How long did it take for you to recover your cycle once you were like, okay, I'm committed to doing it? Because like we can be in limbo forever, right?
Yeah.
But but like at what point did you like once you started to be like, okay, sleep routine, stress routine, eating, like when did you recover?
It's actually wild. So, COVID hit in March of 2020. And that was when my life really started to slow down. Like a lot of people, your different social activities were being canceled. I was not going out and doing a ton of things after work, which was causing me to go to bed later and different things. And even I was teaching at the time at a college as an adjunct, and even that moved virtually. So just a lot of aspects of my life time-wise just started condensed. And I was starting to get better sleep. And so it was like 3 weeks into the pandemic, on April 3rd, my birthday of 2020, I got my first period after like 3 years. And yeah,
so 3 weeks.
Yeah, seriously, 3 weeks. Yeah. So it was just like, knowing that I was sleeping a lot more, I was stressing a lot less. And I think the eating was just naturally coming along with being at home more, really made a huge difference. Now, I didn't have regular periods for another year and a half or so. It was right around the time we got married that things were finally starting to come together. I think the stress after the stress of the wedding, like I was getting in a much better place with things. Or it was, yeah, it was no, about 6 months, and then I was starting to have more regular periods, and then we didn't end up getting pregnant until August of 2021. So it had taken a long time, I think, even for my hormones to get to the right place, because the doctors that I was working with after we got married were like, okay, your period's starting to look better. Like it was that luteal phase, I was still really short. And they're like, your odds of getting pregnant are not very high because of that being so short of a window. And they had said, it's probably January of 2022, you guys would expect to probably start being able to try and seeing, some sort of positive results there. And it was August. And that was like, so I know your one question was, what was something that surprised you that the Lord did? Well, I was not expecting to get pregnant by August. So that was just like such a gift that all this time, all this hard work with HA and knowing that this was the end result, I knew that if I didn't make a change, it was like last June. So we got pregnant in August, and in June, like I had met with the doctor and they're like, listen, if you don't start making these few changes and you start committing to like really making sure you're eating enough, really making sure you're getting that sleep, because I was starting to get back into old habits as the pandemic, and things were starting to loosen up again. I was starting to get busier. They're like, you're not gonna be able to get pregnant. And that was just like, I just cried. And I just like, I can't do this for my family. Like knowing that I'm responsible to either allow us to start a family or not, like I can't let that rest on my shoulders. Like, what am I doing to myself by not committing to the process and not committing to fully be all in, as we like to say with HA. So yeah, it was then just like 2 months later that things were finally starting to look in the right direction, with especially the luteal phase. That was my biggest thing after getting the period regular.
3 weeks to start having some type of like bleed, whether it was anovulatory, which, like just because you have a short luteal phase doesn't mean that you, like aren't ovulating, right? You could be ovulating, but just not having a long enough luteal phase. So 3 weeks until you started to have a period. And what was it, 3 months until you, so
3 weeks, and then around September, so it was like 5 months later that things were starting to look a lot more regular.
In order for you to get pregnant?
No. So I got my period April of 2020. We got married of September 2020. So it was like 5 months until I started seeing like more regular bleeding. And then it was 11 months until I got pregnant. So it was like a whole year of like slowly seeing that luteal phase get longer and longer. Because again, I think there was probably a good chunk of time, because I was using different ovulation detector kits, nothing was coming up. So I think even though I had a period, and what we talk about in the HA Society is like, you may be bleeding, but it may not be a viable, ovulating, period. So just important to know that just because you have it back doesn't mean you're not fully recovered yet. And that was, again, another aspect of my mind, like, well, I'm bleeding again. It's great,
I love that you're sharing this, because I also have a client that like your stories are similar, but not, but to the point of, there's still this next level of surrender in order to actually start ovulating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, like you can get a bleed, like you can get an anovulatory bleed, but that's actually not what you're after. And so it took like layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, like each step of the way, like to the point where each step of progress requires a level of surrender.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so it's like, what we pay is like, we pay in surrender, you know what I mean? In that term of, yeah. And that's really interesting, because I was really thinking about how I was just kind of just talking with the Lord about, Lord, like healing is really interesting. I mean, honestly, like I think before this type of work, not that I didn't believe in the Lord's healing, you know what I mean? I just don't know if I believed in like miracle signs and wonders, and stuff like that. And so like the Lord's been on this like 4-year journey of teaching me about healing, right? And it's just been really, really interesting. But long story short, so I was just talking to him about it, and he was just like, in healing, there is an exchange, right? But it's because like whenever we step into his presence, there's always an exchange. It's either our weariness for his strength, right? Our anxiety for his trust, or for his peace, just all these things. And so he was just kind of talking to me about how healing's the same way, to where it's like there has to be an exchange. There has to be an exchange. And it's like, what are you willing to exchange? And are you willing to exchange the control for healing? Because you can't have both, Like you have to be willing to surrender. And
right. You have to be open. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is like feeling like I didn't want to talk about it with anybody, because I mean, like my family, my parents knew, but like even my friends, like I had a really hard time opening up about it. Opening up about the true aspects of it, where it was like the disordered mindset, the control, not having a period was something that I didn't mind like talking about and sharing with them, but did they know the deep, darker parts of that story? And that's hard. That's really hard that I had to surrender, like, okay, I'm not perfect. And this is the way that I've been struggling, even though I knew what to do, as most of us do, committing to the process and really making that the priority, and not like putting work or other things as a distraction. And as I'm going to do this and focus on this because I'm an overachiever and I'm focusing on making, progress in these areas, but not focusing on my own health. So I think that was really big. And just what you said about like the power of healing and the power of prayer is so huge. We were actually at like a Lent service at our church just prior to the pandemic. It was seriously probably 3 weeks. I think everything was like in 3 weeks for me. It was like 3 weeks before I ended up getting my period, or like a month before. And we were at, and they were talking about like, praying over people and healing and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't talk about specifically what I wanted like prayed over. I just said I needed healing for my body. And then it was a few weeks later that I got my period. And it was just like, wow, that's amazing. Obviously I was praying personally, but I still felt like the group aspect of prayer, and like, that was my first part of surrender. I feel like too, like spiritually, to be like, okay, like I'm actually intentionally praying about this and asking for help with it, because I feel like prior to that, I was just kind of running away from it with God. It was like, thanks God for all this other stuff in my life, and not talking about the dirty stuff,
Oh, that's so funny that you bring that up. So I know I've like shared this before, but it'll forever like rock me, that I remember like in the early stages of like HA recovery, like I would be praying, right? And you know how like they're like, come down if you want prayer. I'm like, the Lord can hear me from my seat. Like, what I mean? But what it really was surrender, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, like the whole thing that I was fighting was surrender. You know what I mean? Of course, the Lord can hear me from my seat, right? And so, like, I would spend multiple times just praying, and I'm like, I know that the Lord hears me. I'm not doubting that. I don't think I need to stand in a certain position and then the Lord will hear me. But it was more surrendering pride, surrendering, you know what I mean? And so I remember my husband grabbed my hand. It was like, okay, well, we're going to go down for prayer. And I was just like, okay, but he hears me from here. Like, anyway, we get down there, and the pastor's wife looks over at me and she's like, the Lord had given me, like a vision of you pregnant right now up there. And I'm like, look here, lady, I don't even want to have kids. Like that's back then when like we didn't want kids. They just told me I had ovarian failure. I was like, I just need my hormones back. I don't really need everything to be working. And that's not even my heart's desire, right? That's not it, right? But it was exactly a year before I got pregnant.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Crazy.
And so I remember kind of just like looking at her like, and I'll never forget, because like, when you confidently hear something from the Lord, like you don't need that other person to like validate you. She was just like, okay. And, just smiled lovingly, very lovingly. Like she was not thrown off by my like face, my tone, my clearly insanity. You know what I mean? But she was like, yeah, okay. And just like smiled at me. And I kid you not, sure enough, like a year later. So it's very interesting that even in that, like, it wasn't so much about do I believe in visions or prophetic words? Because honestly, I didn't then. I did not
Hmm.
then, but like there's no denying that, right? Those,
Right.
but like that wasn't what it was about. But it was about me just even surrendering to even go up there. And so the whole path was surrendering, like
Right.
surrendering what I thought a nutrition coach should look like, surrendering what
Hmm.
fit looks like, surrendering what health looks like, just surrendering all these things I was super resistant to.
Yeah.
And it was just at that point of like, I just knew that the longer I held on to it, I was just going to stay unhealed.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing is like, okay, if I don't make a move, like, what am I just going to extend this to the point where we're not going to start a family for a few years just because I'm not recovered, even though I have all the tools to fully recover? And
Yeah.
I'm getting in my own way at that point, and it's
Yeah.
so hard mentally to just let it go. And that was that surrender. Like every time in prayer, like God was just like coming back to me with that same word, like lay it at the cross. Like, what are you waiting for? And it's funny you mentioned retreats because, or, just, or not retreats, but just the praying over and everything. Cause there was another retreat that I was on April, at the end of April of last year. So 2021, I was at this retreat. It was the same thing where I knew that I had got my period back and things were a lot better, but I was just frustrated with not seeing the quick progress that I thought I would be seeing at that point. And knowing that like it wasn't on my timeline per se, like I could be doing all the things and sometimes we wait and wait and wait, and it's just your body's way of adjusting its hormones again and just getting back on track. And I remember just like praying for that, like also openness and willingness to be ready to be a mom, because as much as like I wanted us to start a family, I felt like part of me wasn't ready. And part of me wasn't ready to see my body change. Part of me was afraid that I was going to be having a hard time with my body image and just like struggling mentally with that. And thankfully, I never did struggle with that truly during my pregnancy. But I really thought it was going to be a big barrier. And a year later, I wanted to attend that same retreat, but then I had Gianna. So it was just kind of funny seeing the whole circle of like, yeah, being prayed over and just like focusing that whole retreat weekend on like my readiness to be a mother and my readiness to accept whatever the Lord had. Like, what if it wasn't to be a mom, or if it was waiting longer until my, cycle looked like it was going to be in the right place to get pregnant. And so, yeah, a year later, I couldn't attend the retreat because I was
Yeah.
in labor. So,
In labor.
yep.
So just because I feel like this is such a real question, like, what does it look like to wait and have hope for you? Like, what did that look like for you being like, okay, I'm surrendering and I have hope, but yet I'm waiting? You know what I mean? That the whole of like, like what did that look like for you in that tough spot?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think just getting to the point where I was really raw and open with my husband about what I struggled with and the ways that he could affirm me and the ways that we could pray together for what that future looked like for us. Again, like praying for a future child that we had never met yet, or that we, didn't even have in my body yet, just like praying for that opportunity to become parents, praying for my full recovery, praying for the opportunity to stay recovered. And I think so, just like continuing to bring all those things in prayer, as hard as it was, to talk about it continuously. Like he asked me, like, how are things going? Like, he was so supportive of me being in the HA Society, always asked, what was going on. And it was funny, on like my calendar, we share like a Google calendar, and he would see those calls and he would be like, great, awesome. Yeah, go for it, and he'd make sure we were home for that. So I
Oh,
think just, yeah, knowing that we
yeah.
live like really busy lives, but he didn't
Yeah.
want me to like not be on those things, because he knew that like that meant a lot to my recovery. So I think just that my brother-in-law was also our functional medicine doctor, and I think just having him be able to check on me like at family parties and different things, like not everyone has that kind of relationship and that opportunity, but I guess the Lord knew I needed somebody who was going to continuously
Yeah.
pursue like my recovery with me medically, where I couldn't lie to Jesse. Like Jesse is like a freaking saint. And I'm just like, I could never lie to you. So I have to be honest every time I talk to you, like,
Yeah.
so I think those were the things that really just helped me when things got tough, because I think Jesse was there for me when he knew I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And then I was able to look him in the eye and be like, yeah, I know I really need to be better, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that is amazing because I remember you sharing that. You're like, actually, it's my brother-in-law and he actually
Mhm.
knows all about HA. And I was like, what's his name? Just
Yeah.
we could put him on our resource list. Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to dive into some of these questions. More so of what was the hardest part of your HA journey, whether it was emotionally, mentally, physically, like what was like the hardest part?
Honestly, I think the hardest part was the fact that my husband and I, why do I do that if I don't have a regular period? How do you track? How do you know when you're ovulating? You can use all the detector kits. You can use, I
Mhm.
had the Mira monitor. I mean, I had all the things. When your hormones are not high enough to be detected or they're totally thrown off, like none of that crap's gonna work for you. And so I think just for me, like I'm such a planner, and just not having a regular cycle was extremely stressful. Like knowing that I was entering into like being open to life with my husband, but knowing that I sometimes had no idea if we were actually fertile or not. And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know how this is going to work. And I think that was a really big surrender aspect for me. And just having to be like, okay, I don't know. We really wanted to wait a year until we got pregnant after being married, just to be able to like enjoy that first year of marriage together. And we got pregnant in August. We were like just shy of our 1 year anniversary when we found out that we were pregnant. So that was fine with me. But
Yeah.
during
You're like,
that
that's
whole
okay.
process, yeah, during that whole process, though, like again, investing in like these expensive, predictor kits and stuff, like you can spend so much money on that stuff. And it's like so funny to me now because as we got closer and closer to actually being pregnant, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm ovulating. Like I don't need a detector kit to figure it out. Like it's
That,
just so
yeah, that
it's
is
just so
so
funny
cool.
how we want to like use all of the specific tools and everything, which are great, but at the same time like knowing that once I was healed, like seeing my body actually do it for me, I was like, oh yeah, wow.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you dove into that because you're right. None of the apps can predict anything when it comes to like an HA cycle, right?
Yeah.
And you can do all the testing or all the high level at home testing, kits, watches, headbands, armbands,
I know, whatever they have on.
like yeah, whatever they come. Oh, I don't know, a ring or whatever, like whatever is
Yeah.
the newest on the market is not going to be able to predict. It's not going to be able to even. You're right because your temps and all your like everything is so erratic that it simply cannot make sense unless you know about HA and you're like, I know exactly why that's happening. That totally makes
Right.
sense, right? But it's so interesting that you're like, I'm ready. I have all this gear and gadgets and
Yeah.
things. Like I can take control of this. And it's like, skirt, there's not enough gear, gadgets, or
Right.
apps that like, no, you actually have to surrender. You can't control this. You have to
Yeah.
surrender. So it's so interesting that as you geared up into the season of life to like, I'm going to take control of
Yeah.
my fertility, which sounds good and is encouraged.
Yeah.
First we have to surrender to heal first, which is just so ironic that you're just like,
Right.
oh Lord, thank you.
I know. And it was just so funny because like and even now being like postpartum, I'm like, I don't need any of that crap. Like it honestly just stressed me out more looking at numbers that didn't make sense
Yeah,
because I was
yes,
so like I was not healed at that point when I started using them. Whereas now again, like I was so like when we were when we ended up getting pregnant, it was like I like knew like I
yes.
felt like I knew instantly because I'm just like, yep, nature works. And like my hormones were in the right place, even though like, and that was what God surprised me with, because by the doctor's recommendations and by what they were seeing hormonally, they're like, okay, probably a few more months that you want to see like good, luteal phase cycles, until. And so I was very nervous like when we first got pregnant. So I did get hormone testing like each week of,
Yeah.
I think for the first like 5 or 6 weeks, just to make sure that we were going to have a viable pregnancy. And praise God we did. Everything looked so amazing. And I was just like, the Lord just like totally provides. And like the Lord knew the desires of my heart to like become a mom. And I just felt like his fulfillment and like my healing process, and just showing me like completely that I had 100% normal pregnancy, and I had an amazing birth and delivery, and I've been great postpartum. And I think it just proved that like my body could do it. And even
Oh
having
yeah.
HA, like you can get to the other side and have a perfectly normal pregnancy. And I think that was just the biggest fear for me was, and I know we talked about it in the HA group before, which gave me some piece of like, there's not research that shows that you're going to have like a problem pregnancy just because you had
Right.
HA prior.
Right.
So like your body is not going to let you get pregnant until you can.
Yeah.
So
And I love that you said that once all your hormones have restored, like, you know, when you're ovulating, like there's
yeah.
so many signs that you're like, oh, and probably coming from like the HA world where you're like, there's
Right.
nothing and it was dead,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, there's no missing
You're
this.
hyper aware of
So
everything.
aware. Yeah, to the point where I'm like, I feel like my body's trying to get me pregnant right now. I was like, absolutely not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To where like now it's like I don't need any predictor kit. Like I know
Yeah.
exactly from all the signs, symptoms, you know what I
Right. The fertility awareness based method is amazing. Like everything that you can
mean?
find out yourself with your own body is just incredible the way like God intended it to be.
Yeah, even to the point where I'm like, hold up. Yep. No, I feel like to the point where now I'll be like, is this 5 days out from ovulation? I think my body's trying to get me pregnant. Like you know what I mean? Because I'm just
Yeah.
like, hold on.
Yeah.
Um, so I love that you brought that up. You're bringing up so many good things that I'm glad that we got to like dive in. So you kind of answer this,
Yeah.
but what is the area that like you think that you have grown the most spiritually?
Oh, I think just being at peace in God's timing,
Mm,
because I think that it's so hard. I mean, again, being diagnosed in 2017 was, and just like kind of ignoring the diagnosis for a few years, and then diving into finally getting my period in 2020. So it had been like I said, 3 years since I had any normal period. I had like spotting randomly at different times, which I was like, oh, I'm starting to bleed again. Now I'm like,
yeah.
oh, that was literally nothing. Um, but I mean, good signs at some points,
Yes.
obviously, for an HA recovery, but like I knew I couldn't tell myself that it was actually a period because it wasn't. But yeah, I think just trusting in his timing and knowing that like there was a lot of ways that the Lord like taught me things during that journey. And had I not gone through that, I would not be the dietitian I am today. I would not be the wife I am today. I would not be the mother I
Yes.
am today. I would not be the friend I am today. I think even just being able to talk with other friends and other clients and different
Mhm.
things about like, okay, yeah, that's not normal. Like not having a period is not normal. And I think again, health classes, doctors, like we need to be talking about how this is not normal to not have a period. And just being able to be an advocate for that, I think is huge. And another reason you're amazing at what you do, Danny is, and just God put us here for a reason to be able to teach others about that. So I think just growing spiritually and knowing that everything is bound in his timing. And my daughter was meant to be born on April 30th of 2022, and not a day earlier, not a day later. And I wasn't meant to recover until I was mentally ready to, be equipped to be a mom and all those things. So I think, yeah, just knowing that it's frustrating sometimes being like, I'm doing all the things, like, why is, my period not looking the way it should, or why is my luteal phase not getting longer? And just being able to trust in the process, surrender each day, and just being like, okay, Lord, I'm doing the best I can, and I'm going to pray for your guidance and peace. And
Yeah.
I think
No,
that's where I'm
that's so
at. Yeah.
real. Yeah, no, that's so real to be like, I am healed. I believe I'm healed. You know what I mean? That just because I'm not ovulating or having a long luteal phase doesn't mean that I'm like exempt from healing or that like
Mhm.
I am broken, right? Because I think it's
Right.
so easy to instantly believe we're broken rather than that we're healed, right?
Mhm.
So because like there's just as much evidence that we're healed, but yet it's easier for us to believe that we're broken. And I mean, like that's a whole other thing. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, so we definitely had to go down that rabbit hole. But the next one was which I think you kind of talked about, but you've been surprising me with these answers, which have been so juicy and good. What was the hardest thing to let go of during your HA recovery?
I think I think just what we've talked about before, just like
Mhm.
that ideal image of what we feel like we should be, especially like working in the health space, like,
Yeah.
and having that falling victim of diet culture of just like, again, it may not be food related, but it could be body image related about this is what I should look like and this is what I should be like, and just comparing myself to other people. I've been struggling with that since I was a teenager. And still
Yeah.
to this day, I have to remind myself that I don't need to believe those things that run through my mind. And I know we talked about that on several HA group calls before of just because you go through your journey and you're recovered doesn't mean you're not going to have these disordered thoughts run through your brain. And it's a matter of like how we act on that. Like, are we going to believe it or are we going to let those thoughts pass by us and say, I'm not going to actually take that to heart today? And I think that's the biggest thing because the devil's still going to try and come in at your weakest points, and you have to know how to handle that situation, how to offer it up in prayer for the day, how to walk in front of your mirror and give yourself a good positive affirmation, or go and call a support person, whether that be a husband, a friend, or whatever, and say, hey, I'm kind of struggling today, like, can you pray for me? Or can we talk about this later? And I think those are really important things to know, because when you are trying to let go and try to be stronger, like, there's the devil's going to try and come in.
Oh yeah, I feel like so for me, I mean, obviously like been recovered, done the thing, done the baby, done the postpartum, now on the other side. And still, I think it's one of those things where it's like I have fully realized that the response and the habit only comes from the spiral, right? From the spiral.
Mhm,
And so for me, being able to stop the spiral is simply being like, I just will not agree with you, right? So whether
mhm.
it's I can't believe my arms look like that. Like, what? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Is like, I will not entertain this and I will not. So it's so interesting that once I've committed to not entertaining that, or it's like it really does pass by.
Yeah, it
But it's
does.
only but like it's only when I'm like, let me think about that again. Let me think about
Mhm.
that. I can't believe my, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? The
Like
more
one
that
thing
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like one thing for me too, and like I have no problem with other like people online posting these kinds of things, but I was so tempted to take pictures of my body postpartum. I've seen a lot of people do that. And I think it's like it's also good to show the world like your stretch marks or like whatever, like, you know, birth and like, pregnancy is a journey, it's a challenge, and you're left with marks that you didn't have prior and like whatever. But I knew that was going to be a trigger for me.
Oh,
I knew
100%.
if I took pictures of my progression or whatever, and I'm breastfeeding, so I do know that I lost the weight well, like afterwards, but I knew that like taking pictures and being able to look at those things were going to control my mind. And I'm like, I want to focus on taking pictures of my daughter and looking back at pictures
Yeah.
of her, like when I'm on my phone, like not stupid pictures of myself that are going to make me focus on my body image, because that is not the priority. And that is not going to put me in a good headspace in regards to falling back into HA. Like, I don't want anything to do with that again. So I think it's just knowing yourself too, of like, yes, if you struggle with looking at pictures of yourself, like being able to focus on the positive aspects of that picture. Like, where were you? Who were you with? What were the memories you made in that picture? Whatever. Like, don't take selfies of yourself if that's gonna be a trigger, like I think
Yeah.
knowing what your triggers are and asking for the Lord for guidance in that and like for strength in that to not fall into that aspect of temptation or trigger that you will.
Yeah, I think also for me is one of those things of like that's what got me in this rabbit hole was posting pictures
Mm-hmm.
like I'm just inspiring others. And for me, it wound up turning into like this validation. And
Mm-hmm.
even if even it was really strange because it wasn't like a whole bunch of likes. Like it wasn't so much that it was like, ooh, I'm so proud, so I'm gonna post it, right? And so it was just simple, like it was enough validation that I liked it and therefore posted that led me down there. Does that make sense? because
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
it actually wasn't even like the high of the likes or the comments, because it was simply just like, oh, I got to this point to where I feel comfortable posting it. And that was the like little entry trap, you know, for me, of being so locked in to my body composition. So I think that's so right, to where it's like, I'm probably just like, and so like, not that I avoid pictures, but I don't take the same amount of pictures of myself that I did before.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Because I'm
Specifically,
like, I don't need to
trigger.
look back at that. Yeah. I don't need to look back at that. I could literally take multiple pictures of myself in the same day, different angles. You're going to look differently, you
Mhm.
know, or you wearing different clothing, or you're in different lighting or whatever, and you're going to look different. It's like, why am I going to focus on that?
Yeah, yeah,
It's not worth it. It's not
yeah.
worth it. So I think just, any areas that someone struggles with, you just got to take it to the Lord and just feel like, God, I've been struggling with this. Like I struggle with taking pictures of myself every day because I want to pick apart myself. Like, help me to not
Yeah,
do that, you
yeah.
know? So I think that's just something that I have come to in every aspect of my life now, is like, I need help with something. God, help me out. I don't know what to do.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So just like the last one, is, what is one area that the Lord addressed during your HA recovery that you're like really surprised by, or that you're like, you want to talk about this right now? Don't you see I'm like going through hell right now? Like, you want to stop and talk about this. So what was that for you?
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, it was right before we went on vacation last summer, and it was like very much it kept coming to me in prayer, like, "You should be eating more. You're stressed out again. You're working a lot again. You know, are you prioritizing, all these things?" And like knowing, like mentally, I'm going on vacation like in a couple weeks. Like I can't be like gaining more weight right now. Like I'm like, God, I already have a period. Like I've been doing good. Like I don't know what, just kind of like ignoring those thoughts of like, I'm doing fine. And it's like, no, you're not. So I think just that's surprise of like my focus on recovery coming right in with vacation time, which again shouldn't have been a problem, because it's like eating and gaining weight on vacation is like no problem, like,
Yeah.
but it was more of again the body image aspect of, are my shorts going to fit, is my bathing suit going to fit, how am I going to look in those pictures, and all those things
Yes.
of just like surrendering that and like going on vacation, being like, all right, we're going to go to outlet malls and I'm going to get a bigger size of everything because that's probably what I'm going to need. And just kind of, again, surrender to all of that of like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because like, I think it's interesting to where we're like, I'm fine. And then vacation hits, you're like, oh my gosh. And then like all these things kind of like, which just shows that like this has its hand in so many areas of our life that it makes sense that it takes time to heal.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That it's not just like a one and done, or just because you get your first period that everything's fine, and that like you're healed, everyone's healed, we're all healed. We don't need to talk about it when the Lord's like, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I know. And it was actually like very ironic too, because I had my period while we were on that vacation, like the entire vacation. And of course I was like super annoyed because I'm like, but I'm super grateful that I have a period, but I'm also super annoyed that I have to like walk to the bathroom every like couple hours,
Yeah.
When we're on the beach and we're hanging out. But again, just that reminder that like buying clothes that you're comfortable and confident in that aren't going to be a trigger for you. And I've had to do that postpartum too, of like, I'm not even going to try on those pants because I know they're not going to fit right now. And I'm not going to send myself back in that, that headspace. So
I think it's one of those things, to where like, I'm
just like investing in yourself, not only in the recovery process, but also in things that are going to help you feel your best. I think investing in
recovery.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like to think about all the time, like, would I try to shove Nuggie, my little one, into a pair of pants that don't fit?
No.
Like, no, I would never do that to her. So why am I like losing my mind if, you know what I mean? Like, why would I even take the same approach to me, right? And so I'm just like, yeah, you're right. I probably wouldn't do that. Okay, on to the, you know what I mean? Just like on to the next. Well, I have loved chatting with you.
Yes,
this has
same.
been wonderful. I think I recorded it. So whether it's live or not, we're going to figure out what happened in the Instagram world, whether it went.
I love it.
So thank you for being my experiment and
Of course.
and of course we'll be in touch. But if you just
Yes.
kind of want to give everybody where they can find you at on Instagram
Yeah.
or Facebook or your website, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram handle is Your Life Nutrition, YOURL Life Nutrition. Always talking about like mindful eating and just nourishing your body. And yeah, just you can find me there, and yourlifenutrition.org. And I'm Brittany Libertor on Facebook. So yeah, find me and friend me. And if you have questions about recovery or need a support person, like always reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna get this all up today and we'll see what happens.
Perfect.
All
Yeah. Keep me posted. Thanks so much,
right.
Ashley.
Bye.